All right, let's roll. This is the purpose. Thank you, everybody, for attending today. And the purpose of this workshop today is, a lot of teachers don't yet know much about America 250. So part of the workshop will be to inform you in a general way about what America 250 is, who's in America 250, how are they connecting to communities. So we're going to do that piece first, and then we're going to then CT Humanities and America 250 has created some teaching materials that are, and I won't speak much about it, Misa, but some teaching materials for all grades. And we'll go over that and talk about how you can get them, how those teaching materials will be available. My name's Steve Armstrong, and I'm on this for specifically, there's an education subcommittee of the America 250 Connecticut Commission in Connecticut, and I'm the co-chair of that education subcommittee. So I'm here in that capacity. So we want you, anybody that's on this, any questions that you have about 250, about what you can do in 250, don't ask the questions during the session, because that's why we're here. Rachel, if you might introduce yourself. And Rachel, first off, is going to give sort of the big picture approach of America 250, what's going on in a general way. So Rachel, take it away.
All right, thanks, Steve. So hi, I'm Rachel Gonzalez. I work at Connecticut Humanities, and I'm the administrative assistant. I do a lot of the behind the scenes work, coordinating for the commission. So you probably have a little bit of an idea since you're here of what the 250th is, but I will give a little bit of that big picture on what the state has been working on. Starting with the commission just generally. So July 4th, 2026 is the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. The state of Connecticut is looking to commemorate this anniversary and really use it as a moment to reflect on the ideals of the nation's founding and how they've shaped our country in general and Connecticut in particular over the last 250 plus years, and really trying to bring that into now and into the future. So the America 250 CT Commission was established by executive order in 2022, and they've been charged with guiding the state's commemorative efforts. Steve is on the commission, as well as being the chair of the Education Subcommittee, and Connecticut Humanities is the administrative agent that's doing a lot of the work. So the commission really envisions this as a grassroots effort, and to that end, they've been developing resources guided by 4 themes, which you may or may not already be familiar with, but we're going to talk about them quite a bit today, I think. So tell inclusive stories, which encourages folks to find stories from our history that were previously untold or undertold, in an effort to really make sure all of Connecticut's residents can see themselves reflected in the commemoration. For the common good, which encourages civic engagement. Power of place, which recognizes that Connecticut has countless communities and they all have their own unique identities, and really hopes to elevate stories all around the state. And then finally, doing history, which encourages exploration of the history of Connecticut's role in the development of the nation. I do want to share, just before we get into the education specifically, I want to share a couple of networks that the commission is building around the state, our local committee network and our affiliate network. And these are the groups that are doing a lot of the hard work to actually take the resources that the commission is developing and turn them into programs and exhibits and events and all sorts of things around the state. So I definitely encourage you to check in with the folks that are doing 250th work in your area. All of the red towns and cities are places that we have a committee contact for already. And this map was last updated a couple of weeks ago. So we've got a couple more that have turned red since then. And then the PINs are affiliate organizations around the state, which kind of range from historical societies to museums to zoos and everything in between. So all sorts of stuff going around the state, and I can share the links to find the contact info for these folks for those who are interested. So I'm going to turn it over to Misa Giroux, who did a lot of the hard work actually putting these educator resources together. The QR code on this slide will take you to a place where you can download the PDF of the lesson plans that she's going to go over, but I'll also throw that in the chat as soon as I'm done speaking. So Misa,
Rachel,
I'm going to turn it to you.
with your permission, I'd just like to add 2 points about the commission, if that's okay.
Sure, go ahead.
2 things that you might want to know. Excuse me. The commission has spent hours debating what should be the nature of this event in Connecticut. Because every state has their own commission. And the debate has been, should this be a celebration of events surrounding America 250, or should this be a commemoration? And the difference of that, should we be there's many states that what they're doing is purely celebratory. They're celebrating the Declaration of Independence. They're celebrating the Revolutionary War. But you know what? In Connecticut, we kind of framed our thinking more around, you want to commemorate, but you also want to study. What were the implications of those founding documents? How are the ideas of the founding documents playing out today? So that's the way. And by the way, that also that we don't want to tell. We want to tell the stories of everyone who lived in Connecticut at that time and today. So, for example, what was the role of indigenous folks in the events of surrounding and before the American Revolution? What were the role of Blacks in Connecticut during this period? So it's not the deep, we're all for celebrating, but also we want to study these events and the implications of these events. That's as much part of this as the celebration point. And just so you know, there's also a national commission that has been at some levels helpful. And also President Trump has created, there's also a commission. Is it called, Rachel, the White House Commission? Is that the title?
It's the White House Task Force. The
White House Task Force. And there's, we take general guidance from them, I think, but I don't think they're in the mood, they're not in the point of trying to dictate what states are doing. So we're comfortable with the commemoration idea, and many of the events that we're thinking about and helping plan are in that spirit. Misa, take it away.
Go ahead, Misa.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Thanks, Rachel. I'm just going to share my screen here so we can all look at the packet together. Okay. How is that? Work okay for everyone? Or is it just the Zoom link?
We're looking at at page 1 of the resource guide.
Excellent. Thank you, Steve. Okay, so my name is Misa Giroux. I am the Digital Humanities Education Manager at Connecticut Humanities. Prior to this position, I taught English and was a librarian archivist at a couple different high schools and taught at Washington Montessori School. So I have some experience with high school, some experience with younger students. But this packet is really for teachers that are not necessarily having a lot of time in the classroom focused on either social studies, focused on America 250 specifically, or they're just really looking for an easy access packet that they can use to bring some of these ideas into their classroom. Experienced teachers are also welcome to modify this packet. So Steve mentioned it speaks to all grades. We focused specifically on grade 3, grade 5, grade 8, and high school, based on how things aligned with the standards, the Connecticut Social Studies Standards. But any lesson should be able to be scaled up or down depending on grade level. So we wanted to make sure it was accessible to all teachers. And as Steve mentioned, really wanted to connect sort of ideas about the Declaration, America 250, to the present, right? So it's not only based in history, it's very much based in sort of what students can take away today about their communities. So I'll go through just sort of the structure of the packet, and then I'll focus specifically on one lesson for grade 5. So going through the packet, there's a list of commission members, and the packet is broken up by those themes that Rachel mentioned. We'll go into a little more detail about those. But page 4 is sort of the guide for using the packet. As the nation prepares to commemorate the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence and the founding of the country, this Educator's packet encourages K-12 students to reflect on the ideals of the nation's founders and consider how those ideals have evolved over time. So, like Steve said, not just a celebration, but considering what those ideals mean today. Supporting a reawakening of civic engagement, this packet touches on the following America 250 Connecticut themes, specifically within the context of Connecticut and the American Revolution. So grade 3, let me zoom in a little bit. Grade 3 focuses mainly on the power of place. So unique contributions from Connecticut communities. Students are encouraged to focus on their town specifically. And so it's called Our Town Story, What Makes Our Town Special. Why certain places, certain historical places are preserved, valued, and really speak to the towns that these students are living in. So they're encouraged to visit historical societies, visit just local landmarks, things like that, really get them just kind of out into the world around them. So focusing on Connecticut specifically, but also kind of more of a local focus there. Telling inclusive stories. This is the grade 5 lesson that I'll be going into more detail about. It focuses on Hannah Bunce Watson, whose story gets told. She was the first publisher of the Connecticut Current, which is now the Hartford Current, along with her husband during the Revolutionary era. So this is very much sort of everyone has a story that can be told, but hers hasn't been as amplified as others. So focusing on kind of whose voices have been heard over time, whose have been marginalized, and how we can use this opportunity during America 250 to lift up other voices, right? How can we sort of share voices that haven't been heard so much? Doing history is for grade 8, focusing on Benedict Arnold and Abigail Hinman, sources and stories. Figuring out how we make sense of the past, how we look at sources, find sources, analyze sources, thinking about sort of who holds knowledge, who has knowledge, and how students specifically can really engage and ask questions, right, and be part of learning history. So that one sort of ties together a couple different ways to look at sources and analyze them, right, finding out if they're credible, finding out sort of what further questions students can ask to really be participants in this history. And then the last theme is for the common good, which is a high school lesson on Lemuel Haynes called Freedom and Liberty in 1776. And for us, the ideas around for the common good are sort of what ideas and ideals during the Revolution are still around today, which influenced civic life in Connecticut, and sort of do the same ideas have the same meaning. So does what did freedom mean then? What does it mean now? Sort of comparing and contrasting those. So some of these lessons are brand new. Some are sourced from materials from ConnecticutHistory.org and Teach It. So Teach It is Connecticut Humanities resource of lesson plans for teachers. ConnecticutHistory.org is our state encyclopedia. So that's really where these sources
Could
are
I
drawn
ask
from.
you, sorry,
Sure.
could you just talk a little more about what Teach It is? I mean, many people know, but what actually type of materials are in Teach It?
Yeah, absolutely. So Teach It started as kind of for teachers by teachers. So lesson plans were submitted that any other teacher could access based in sort of Connecticut history, Connecticut culture, grades 3, 4, 5, 8, and high school. So those are all freely available on our website. And it features inquiry lessons. So just some starting questions, compelling questions for students to think about, supporting questions from there, primary sources, resources that they can access, and different activities and ways of sharing their knowledge. So those are sort of arranged from the Revolutionary War, Civil War, 20th century in Connecticut, just a really big span. But that's a resource for teachers. So some of these lessons are drawn from that. Some are more drawn from ConnecticutHistory.org, the encyclopedia side of things. But that's where I got most of the materials, and they're all linked throughout. So if there's something like a resource that you want to find more about, the link should be directly there in the packet. And like I said, all the lessons align with the Social Studies Standards, which you can access just clicking on this link. But that doesn't mean that they are limited to that grade level or that standard, right? Teachers can figure out how they want to modify things to make it more relevant to their classroom. We also participate in Creative Commons, which is an open source, open access license. So all of our materials are free to modify. If you would like to credit Connecticut Humanities to maintain the license, that's the way we encourage it. But yes, please modify to suit your needs. Any questions on structure so far, or can I go into one of the lessons? Okay. So let's go to.
And just to reiterate, as Misa's doing that any of these lessons, I mean, they're sort of grade specific, but any of these lessons can be modified for any grade. And if you have teachers, if it's you, or if you have teachers that don't know much about the topic, there's plenty of background material included in each lesson, so they would be able to teach that with some level of competency.
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, we tried to include sort of background information, basic knowledge, so that each lesson can be just sort of absorbed by the teacher and shared in the classroom. So I'm on page 11. This is the lesson for grade 5. So again, the theme, tell inclusive stories. This section encourages educators and students to delve into stories that represent all the people of Connecticut during the Revolutionary era, both past and present. By exploring previously untold stories of Connecticut residents during this time, we can enable everyone to find a place in our nation's narrative. Right, so trying to think about that past-present idea. Some questions to consider surrounding this theme. Whose voices from Connecticut during the Revolution have been traditionally heard, and whose have been marginalized? How can we uncover and share a more complete picture of this period? What stories remain untold in your community? Whose voice has been heard in the past? How is this celebration an opportunity to lift other voices? So then there's sort of a table of contents here for the specific lesson, and each theme has that. So every lesson has an educator guide, which includes a time allotment, so an estimate for how long it might take in your classroom. Learning objectives, so specific things that students will gain from participating in the lesson. Specific standards that the lesson meets. Materials you might need, paper, pens, a projector, things like that. A step-by-step walkthrough of the lesson. Opportunities for assessment, so how students can share their knowledge, whether it's an essay, presentation. Each one has different options for different student levels and engagement. Images and additional resources, So including a visual element and then additional links to either a ConnecticutHistory.org article or another primary source that's relevant. And then each lesson has some pages that are printable, so worksheets that students can directly access. There are more for the younger grades, but there are still some worksheets included for high school as well. So that's sort of the breakdown of how each lesson is structured. Okay, so for Hannah Bunce Watson, whose story gets told, we have 5th grade here, generally 1 to 2 class periods. Obviously, schools are different, right? Periods are different, but thinking about what can take place in the classroom, what can take place out of the classroom, I would say 1 to 2 periods in class, but they can always adapt as they see fit.
Misa, could I just ask, as you get into this, for someone that doesn't know, could you briefly identify Hannah Bunce Watson for somebody that doesn't know that?
Oh, sure. I was going to get into it, but yes,
Okay.
I will definitely do that.
I'm ahead of your game. My apologies.
You're okay. All good.
Do it when you get there.
So learning objectives, after they complete this lesson, students will be able to identify key facts about Hannah Bunce Watson and her role as publisher of the Connecticut Current during the American Revolution. So she was also a mother of 5. She was 27 during this period. So kind of a remarkable story, truly just making the most of her experience. And it's a story that's not widely told. So students can really kind of engage with this person who persevered. She faced a lot of obstacles. The publishing company burned down, or the printing press burned down. So really just trying to highlight just her perseverance through the whole thing. Students will understand that telling inclusive stories means sharing the experiences and contributions of all people, including those who may have been previously excluded from the main historical narrative. And students will be able to construct a brief narrative or Hall of Fame entry for Hannah Bunce Watson that includes her significant contributions as a publisher, demonstrating an understanding of telling a more inclusive story. The standards it connects to describe how people's perspectives of the American Revolution are documented in historical records while noting representation of marginalized voices. The students can look at journals, letters, newspaper articles, and pamphlets, and develop a claim about significant people, places, or events in Connecticut during the American Revolution. And Hannah Bunce Watson is one of the people referenced directly in the standards. As far as materials go, there's a student-friendly summary of her story. Teachers can either absorb that information, share it with students just orally, or share it as a printout. There's also a more advanced reader version. So depending on the level that your students are at, reading-wise, either version is available. And then they'll only need paper, a writing utensil, or if your students are typing, a computer to complete the opportunities for assessment. Okay, so introducing this lesson should take about 20 minutes. She can be introduced as a remarkable woman from the time of the American Revolution. She ran a newspaper called the Connecticut Current, which was important for sharing news about the Revolutionary War, and that was a very uncommon role for women at the time. So like I said, you can share the story aloud, have students read independently, and engage with students about the challenges she faced. Despite this, she kept the newspaper going and used it to support the idea of American liberty. The interesting thing about her story as well is that she very much promoted revolutionary ideas. So encouraging dispute and encouraging just sort of going against the grain, which was not done by a lot of newspapers at the time. And spend 10 minutes sort of comparing narratives. Her obituary only said, "Died in the city on Sunday last, Mrs. Hannah Hudson, wife of Mr. Barzillai Hudson, senior editor of this paper, aged 58 years. So what's missing from that, right? Why is that obituary? Why is that description only calling her just a wife, references her husband as the senior editor, but doesn't really include her accomplishments? So talking to students about why that might be, why she's left out. But much later on, right, her story is told, and the Connecticut Women's Hall of Fame references her as an important figure, and she's been recognized as one of America's first female publishers. But how can her story be more amplified, right? Why wasn't it well known at the time? And even today, right, it could be more publicized. So after students learn about her story, they can participate in any of these opportunities for assessment. There's a Hall of Fame entry, so they can imagine they're creating a Young Historians Hall of Fame, people from the American Revolution, to write a little write-up about Hannah Bunce Watson, but making sure that her accomplishments are included, right? And that her story is more complete. They could also choose to focus on different women that were underrepresented at the time. Mary Ledwith Hayes, Phyllis Whitley, Deborah Sampson. So some other options here. And then if they chose to read the more advanced version, they can participate in a newspaper project, potentially what an issue of the Connecticut Current would have looked like during the time Hannah Bunce Watson was publishing, or creating a timeline of her life. And that can be presented as a physical display, digital display, whatever your students are working with. So those are some options for sharing what they've learned. This is the header of the Connecticut Current during her time, 1778, and an image of her. So if students are curious, want more of a visual aid, that's included, as well as some additional resources about her. And those are direct links. So from the packet, teachers can access those directly. Any of the printable materials in this packet, worksheets, stories, things like that. I tried to do a little color coding. So any of the light blue things teachers can print directly. So this is the short Hannah story version, and included some vocabulary. So this is a grade 5 lesson. Students might not know these words specifically. So a definition, an example of the word in a sentence, and then the next page features some activities with those words. So there's a word bank, fill in the blanks, and then a multiple choice activity as well. So teachers can just print those directly. There's another worksheet for short answer questions. They can engage with Hannah's story, and these try to connect to students' everyday life, right? So not just what can you recall, right? But what is the specific time that you had to deal with something like this? Really engage them personally. How do you share your ideas, right? When did you face a challenge? So getting students to connect with the material on a more kind of personal basis. A longer version of Hannah's story is included for more advanced readers. And that is the extent of that lesson, but extension activities are also included for teaching this theme. So there are more Teach It lessons that are linked here that can fall under telling inclusive stories. Going to page 36, the high school activity on Lemuel Haynes also very much falls under inclusive stories. And then another Teach It is linked here about the Amistad. People, places, and events that are also relevant to the theme, if you just want a little more information, or if you think that that could be another good lesson for students. Those are linked there as well. Okay, so that's the grade 5 lesson. The rest go on in a similar fashion. The high school grade 8 ones get a little more into detail, using more primary sources. But like Steve said, they can be modified to suit any grade. There's also going to be a Google Doc version so that teachers can directly just take text if they want to move things around and make the lessons more suited to how they do things in the classroom. So a Google Doc version and a Word document to come.
Misa, I think there's a question in the chat, by the way.
Okay, thank you. Oh, sure. So Sybil Ludington is referenced a little bit in here. There are also in the research section of this activity ways that students can do further research on women during the revolution. Thank you for that.
I think the question might be, Misa, that it can, if a teacher has, say, another name that's another person of the Revolutionary era, can we include, is there any way to include that? We were talking about doing some addendums to these lessons, so there is a way to do that.
Sure.
In other words, if a teacher says, hey, you should really also have this person, certainly email us and we can, we're going to create some addendums to these lessons. Those would be included in that.
Yeah, absolutely. They can be added onto.
And you know, Misa, I'm wondering if you would be comfortable, because some people that could you briefly, and I emphasize briefly, just talk about what the 4 themes are and what they sort of mean. If somebody wanted to work with those themes, could you do that? Just what are the 4 themes and just talk a little about each theme.
Sure, yeah. So power of place is one that speaks to sort of communities in Connecticut and how they've contributed over time. The goal of this packet with that theme was to try and get students to connect to their local towns. So explore kind of the areas around them and why places might be historically recognized or preserved over time. So it's power of place. Telling inclusive stories, thinking about whose voices have been amplified over time, whose haven't, how we can do a better job just in general of amplifying maybe voices that haven't been heard or marginalized. How the 250 celebration is an opportunity to do that. Doing history is getting students engaged with sort of the historical process, right? Looking at sources, asking questions. How do we make sense of the past? And then for the common good, so what choices were made, what ideals were amplified during the revolution that influenced Connecticut over time, and how do those speak to today? Right? Do they still mean the same things? Do we still ask the same questions? So those are the 4 themes.
Rebecca Tabor is on, and Rebecca, as some of you may know, has a role in, is the director of History Day in Connecticut. Rebecca, I'm wondering if you see any connections to this work with History Day.
Oh, I do completely. I think Mike is on this call as well, and Misa and I have already met, but Connecticut Humanities is going to be working with us to create some more in-depth articles about some of the topics that are covered in this material based from ConnecticutHistory.org. So there is a connection. The other thing is I've already kind of written a note to myself. We do a monthly newsletter, and I was going to share actually this packet in our September newsletter to share with folks, because I think, you know, one of the things we're planning at the Old State House is that this coming summer, so the summer of 2026, we will do a History Day exhibit, but tying into the theme of doing history and highlight some of the projects that hopefully will relate to the 250th.
And just, Rebecca, would you mind telling people reminding folks of the theme of History Day this year?
Absolutely. So obviously we're an affiliate of National History Day, and they're very tied into the commemoration efforts. This year's theme for National History Day is Revolution, Reaction, Reform, and History. And so if you're not familiar with History Day, all of the projects, they can be on any kind of history from local to state to national or international, but all of the topics have to relate to that annual theme. And it was deliberately picked to tie into the 250th.
And thanks, Rebecca. And Misa, I
problem.
can ask you a question if you don't mind. If there is a teacher, wow, I want to do some research on my town in the Revolutionary War, or Connecticut in the Revolutionary War, and they're novices, no disrespect meant at all, of how to read. How would a teacher go about doing that? Where would you tell them to start if they want to do some research? So say Connecticut in the Revolution. Where do you start with that if you wanted to have kids research that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would send them to connecticuthistory.org because there's an entry on every town. So might not have a reference to the Revolution, but potentially could. And also their town historical societies are always great resources. And also if they have questions about sort of how to engage their students in that, I am happy to have that conversation as well. So those are my recommendations.
As you can probably tell, that we would emphasize the commission. I mean, students are going to study national themes and national events, obviously, but we really think the commission and the Education Subcommittee really thinks this is a golden opportunity for students to do research on Connecticut and on their own town. That this is really provides a golden opportunity for that. Any questions of Rachel or Misa? And I see Sam is on here. Sam, welcome. Sam, are you on with us?
I am, yes. Hello, everybody.
Sam, how about if one wanted to do research on Indigenous peoples during this period?
Yeah.
How would one do that? Could you help out with that one?
Yeah, I would say there's two great places to visit. The Tantaquidgeon Museum in Uncasville, Connecticut. We actually just had a ceremony for the 30 Mohegans that died in the American Revolution, with a plaque that was put in the ground at the museum. So you can visit that, ask lots of questions. And then also the Pequot Museum at Mashantucket. Both places would be great places to start your research.
Right. And I see Joanna, Joanna Steinberg is on. Joanna, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. I'm putting you guys on the spot here, but if one wanted to do research on, say, Blacks during the Revolutionary era, where you got any ideas on where somebody would go for that?
I mean, our Whitney Library is a great site for doing research. We have finding aids and materials that we can make available.
Could you just identify where you work?
Oh, sorry. I'm the Director of Learning and Engagement at the New Haven Museum. And we have a research library on site with sources that would tie into this topic. So we would love to make our site available. You're asking where to do the research to see original
just
material or reading lists?
Where would you start? Just some ideas on where one might go if they wanted to do research in this field.
Yeah, of course, Yale has great resources and libraries to use, the public library. Again, our site, Gilder Lehrman Center, has an amazing listserv that they send monthly emails from, and they put together a great reading list for schools as well on the topic. But those are, I'm thinking very New Haven, in a very New Haven centric mode right now, but those are some of the sites here that I would recommend.
Thanks. Does anyone else on the call have ideas about, hey, if a teacher wanted to do some research on the Revolutionary era, or, work with their kids on this era? Anyone else have any ideas on good sources or good places to go for this? Misa, a question for you. There are other teacher lessons specifically on this period, correct?
Absolutely. For all grade levels, the grade 3 and grade 4, 5 lessons are generally more specific or more general. Grades 8 and high school focus more on individuals and specific sort of primary sources. But absolutely, Teach It has a lot of resources for this time period.
Steve, I'd also like to recommend this book. I saw Dr. Manisha Sinha give an amazing lecture at the Pequot Library. And this is a book called The Slave's Cause, The History of Abolition, that goes back to the colonial period, back to the Revolution. And she had really helpful chapters that address this specifically.
Thank you.
And I'm just going to poke in to add that at that education resources link that I put in the chat earlier, there are a few kind of selected lessons from Teach It that are already pulled out, and they're already listed on that page for each grade level. So a little bit built out there already, and there's way more actually on Teach It, but we're linking to it already a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Three things that I'd like to share that are going to be going on in this year. One, a suggestion, if you think your school district, if this works for your school districts, we've pitched to like some historical societies and museums that an interesting thing was their jobs, by the way, these local commissions' jobs are to create events, exhibits related to 250. It's been discussed with them that students might be wonderful additions to their to those local commissions. So if in your district, if you happen to have specific students or a number of students that you think this would be appealing to them, go for it. Because I can tell you that the museums and historicals we've talked to have been very, very enthusiastic about that idea of getting kids involved into that. And there's some right there, local committees, there's the link right there. And Rebecca, back to you. There's a question about the dates of History Day here.
Yep. So I'm working on that because we have 5 regional contests and 1 state contest. The state contest is, if I'm remembering correctly, I think it's May, whatever that Saturday is, May 2nd, 2026. But as you can imagine, it takes an incredible amount of work to try and figure out. It is May the 2nd. 2026 is the state contest. We're still working on the regional contests, and we usually announce that in early September.
And Rebecca, I hate to bring this up, but some people may, I won't say may, probably heard about some cutting of funding for National History Day. And, not to belabor negatives here, but could you just give a what's up with that?
Yeah, absolutely. So National History Day received funding through grants from the National Endowment for the Humanities, which, as we all know, was impacted. And so NHG has lost about $300,000 in promised grants. However, I just actually talked with the folks at the national office in July, earlier this month, I should say, and they feel confident that the national contest is going on, that they will continue on, and are really not worried about the national contest. I think the concern is more on some of our affiliate programs, because it varies. It's different in every state. So in Connecticut, the Connecticut Democracy Center runs our state's affiliate of History Day. In other states, for instance, in Maryland and Nevada and Georgia, to name a few, the Humanities Council actually runs the affiliate program of National History Day. So those are being really, really badly impacted, obviously, by the NEH funding cuts, because those directly impact Connecticut Humanities. But, you know, we certainly are impacted a little bit by loss of funding because of NEH cuts, but we are confident we will tighten the belt and continue on. Nationals feels the same way.
Thank you. So I mentioned three things that that I would say. One is working with local groups, the local commissions, having students work with them. They're eager to have the students, by the way. So that might be a thing to do. Second thing is, you may or may not know that I believe the date is November 16th is the kickoff for the next Ken Burns series, which is on the Revolutionary War. And we're going to be producing, the subcommittee, we're going to do a 3-part webinar series in conjunction with that series on the Revolutionary War in Connecticut. So just be on the lookout for that. And there's some people on the call that are going to be asked to help with the diverse perspective side of things. But so that's coming. Ken Burns, does anyone know how many part series is it? It's a standard Ken Burns series. But and I believe the date is November 16th, but the webinar series will be in conjunction with that. And then the third thing is we would encourage, and this is not to, to hopefully match with Connecticut History Day, not to compete with History Day at all, but we would encourage students of all grades to do research in their own communities on this period. So we're going to encourage that. We're actually still working on creating the depository where teachers can send work, and schools and individual teachers will be recognized for these contributions. So sorry, this piece of it's a little vague, but just we're going to be sending out some material. We'd love to see students looking at their own communities in the context of the Revolutionary era. So we're going to promote that, and we would, we'll get more to you about that and how we're going to recognize. I'm actually working, Rachel, there's a funder that I have spoken to that actually going to provide some award money for this. So we'll talk about that. Misa, what else do you want to tell us about the educational materials? Anything, or education, or?
I'm happy to answer any questions if people see the packet later and are confused by something or think that they could use more resources. And again, I'll point to Teach It as another place for lesson plans, things to use in your classroom.
And somewhere, Misa, your email is on them somewhere to be found?
I will put it in the chat directly.
Great.
And just general questions, you can always email info@ct250.org, and we are always there.
Mm-hmm. The frustration, I'll only speak personally here, but the frustration that I feel, and maybe the Ed Committee or somebody should have done a better job, is there's a lot of people that are just now learning that 250 is going to happen. So, and so we're going to we're going to really try to do that in the fall, that, you know, this is coming, this is an important thing, and it's going to provide many opportunities for your students. Anything else anybody wants to talk about?
We are going to have the recording available on the website, and we'll send it out via email or via our listserv as well. But it'll be available if there's anybody that you know that wanted to watch it but couldn't join.
And, you know, folks, I'll offer this. I don't know that Rachel or Misa want me to offer this, but if there's if you in your own community, if you're saying, hey, I'd like to work with the local commission, but I don't know who to call, I don't know any of these people, I or somebody else would help make those contacts for you. So if you want to work with it, but God, I don't know a soul over there, I don't know these people, we can help facilitate those conversations. Hey, have a good afternoon.
Have a
Thanks,
good one.
everyone.